by Romanian police after they used tear gas and water cannon at an anti-government rally in Bucharest. Thousands of Romanians who live abroad have been demonstrating, calling for the government to resign. The protesters, many of whom drove across Europe to attend this, are angry about the way Romania is being governed by the Social Democrats, which they blame for corruption and a lack of opportunities. Joining me now is Kit Gillett, who has been at the demonstration in Bucharest and spoke to some of the protesters. And so what were they saying to you about why they've made their way back to Romania for this and what they're hoping to achieve from these protests?
Thanks, Miriam. So the people I talked to were very motivated. They had been angry about many of the steps that the government has been taking in the last 18 months, that they feel will weaken the rule of law. You know, these are steps that basically would decriminalise low-level corruption or reduce and weaken the fight against corruption, which has been a big problem in Romania for a long time. And people are angry about that and feel that the system needs to change.
How does the turnout at tonight's demonstration compare with past protests we've seen in Romania?
So tonight's protest, there were an estimated 100,000 in Bucharest and maybe another 40,000 in other cities. So it was a large protest. It wasn't as large as the 500,000 people we saw last February, in February 2017, when the government first tried to pass some legislation that would have weakened the rule of law. But it's the largest protest we have seen in 8-9 months. So it was large anyway. But then what happened tonight was shocking. It was very surprising. In the past, these protests have been peaceful. I have been covering Romania now for 5 years, and tonight was the first night I have ever been tear gassed. It's the first night I have ever seen the use of water cannons by the security forces. It's the first night I have seen large-scale clashes. You know, there have always been small clashes on the sides of protests, but this was large-scale clashes that lasted for a long time, and it was a shocking kind of turn of events.
Indeed, we're just seeing some of the images now of police using tear gas and water cannon against the protesters. Is there a fear that tensions could escalate if they are perceived to be using excessive force against civilians?
Very much so. You know, we will have to wait and see what happens next. This protest tonight was supposed to be a one-off in the sense that there is not a protest scheduled for tomorrow night. But given what has happened tonight, I think there will need to be some sort of manifestation tomorrow that will act as a release valve. We are already seeing comments from the president of the country who comes from the main opposition party saying that this was condemning the brutal intervention of the security forces and saying that the interior minister needs to explain how events turned out tonight. So this will lead to a lot of soul searching, and it could lead to more protests. It certainly left a lot of people very angry.
Indeed, and people want change in the country. They want an end to corruption. The numbers were considerable tonight, but it in many ways didn't meet the ambitious targets that organisers had been hoping for. Nonetheless, what sort of message does this send to the government?
I mean, it sends a very strong message that the people are not going anywhere. That's the most, that's, I guess, all they could really hope to accomplish in the short term. The problem is that, these protests have been going on for a year and a half, and they have been, sometimes bigger than this, sometimes smaller, and they have not really had an impact on the government. The government has continued to push through legislative changes and changes that, again, many people believe and fear will weaken rule of law. And nothing that's happened in Romania has altered this path that the government is taking. And, we have also seen strong condemnation from the country's international partners. We have had comments from the US State Department, from the EU Commission, from the European Commission, from the EU, from various embassies in the country, all saying that they are deeply concerned about some of the changes that the government are pushing through, that they are worried about backsteps in the fight against corruption. And none of those statements have had any impact. And, it looks like words might not be enough, and that there needs to be perhaps more vocal intervention, for something more from outside the country in order to really impact and really maybe stay the government's hand, if that's what the international community feels is necessary.
Well, thank you very much, Kit Gillett, for joining us there. I appreciate your time joining us there from Bucharest in Romania.